that Dr. Katie Lawler received her doctorate from the joint program between the Stanford University Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences and the Pacific Graduate School of Psychology. She trained at both the Stanford University Medical Center and the VA Palo Alto Healthcare System, focusing on human-animal interactions, cognitive behavioral therapy, neuropsychology. And prior to her career in clinical psychology, Dr. Lawler held positions with NBC News in Beijing and New York City, the U.S. Department of State in Washington, D.C., and the Governor's Office of California. So thanks, and welcome, Katie, or Dr. Lawler.
Of course. No, please call me Katie, and I'm so honored to be here to discuss probably my very favorite topic. I want to put the caveat out that during the pandemic, my entire caseload is virtual, so I did move up here to Lake Tahoe just to be surrounded by nature and beauty, and I'm discovering this week the one downside to that is an unstable internet. We're having a windstorm currently today, so I am on a hotspot, and I have given Marvick my cell phone number. I can switch to my internet, but I thought this might be stronger. So my most profuse apologies if I cut out at any time. What I've done to compensate for that is I've loaded all of the data. I've made these very information-packed slides, so at least you'd have everything that I was going to say. But I have prayed to the internet gods just for the next hour. So today I'm going to be speaking about the health benefits of companion animals. Okay. And so the first question is, why do we love our companion animals so much? And I think with fellow humans, especially our loved ones, our relationships are complex. They're full of highs and lows, breakups and misunderstandings, arguments and hurt feelings. Our pets, however, even on the worst of days, and we really do come to rely on their unconditional devotion and the fulfillment that they bring to our lives. And several recent studies have shown us that humans are biologically predisposed to feel a deep connection with our animals because they've been essential to our survival for millions of years. So recently, the Human Animal Bond Research Initiative, HABRI, they performed an economic analysis on the health benefits and related cost savings associated with pet ownership. So this study calculated an $11.7 billion savings in the U.S. healthcare industry as a result of pet ownership, with the largest savings due to a lower occurrence of physician office visits by pet owners as compared to non-owners. So this is a fact. Of the 132.8 million pet owners in the U.S., they visit the doctor approximately 60% less than the average non-pet owner. And I'll kind of go into those reasons why. And then I'm just numerous hospitals and healthcare facilities in the US are already incorporating pets into their treatment plans as adjunct therapy for several physical and mental health diagnoses. So first, I'd really like to focus on our physical health, in particular, heart health. So cardiovascular disease, which is the same as heart disease, they're interchangeable terms, is the leading cause of death in this country, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. In this country, 1 in every 4 deaths is the result of heart disease. And first, I'm not going to get us into the weeds, but I thought it might be helpful to provide a bit of an overview of heart disease. So it's really an umbrella term that includes a range of conditions that affects the heart and involves diseased blood vessels. So these are our arteries, our veins, structural damage to those, and or blood clots. So most of these conditions are the result of a process known as atherosclerosis. This will be the kind of the heaviest science part too. I don't want to lose anyone, but I think it's important just to kind of provide this base of knowledge. So atherosclerosis develops when a plaque, so that's cholesterol, fat, cellular waste projects, starts to accumulate in our arterial walls, causing vessels that carry the oxygen-rich blood to the heart and other organs to become really stiff, and then they narrow. So this plaque can occur in any artery of the body, and a piece of plaque can actually detach and be carried by the bloodstream, lodging in a different artery. So we might have plaque in one part of our body, it detaches and goes to a totally different part. When this happens, plaque can partially or completely block the blood flow to an organ or the extremity that it has migrated to. And then a blood clot can also form on top of a plaque surface, potentially cutting off blood flow to that artery. And this is what these are the reasons that we might have a heart attack, chest pain, or a stroke. And then one tiny bit more of the real detailed science information. Atherosclerosis can also lead to what's called coronary heart disease or coronary artery disease. Again, a lot of these terms are interchangeable. But this occurs when plaque forms in the coronary arteries, so those surrounding our heart, reducing blood flow and oxygen to the heart muscle. And plaque can also accumulate in even the very smallest arteries around the heart, resulting in coronary microvascular disease. And this buildup really causes a lot of structural damage to the inner walls of the blood vessels, resulting in spasms and decreased flow to the heart muscle. Okay, so what I'm really going to hone in now is our resting heart rate, because it plays a huge, significant role in cardiovascular disease. Our PEPs are going to come in just a few slides. So first, we need to understand that the relationship between our resting heart rate, so right now, when we're sitting, when we're in our favorite chair, this is our resting heart rate. It's our baseline. So we need to understand that relationship between our resting heart rate, cardiovascular disease, heart disease, and a cardiovascular incident. So this would be a heart attack right here, chest pain, or a stroke. So a high resting heart rate can come from a few different places, and it's going to be the third thing I mentioned that we're going to be most concerned about. So we may experience a temporary imbalance of our autonomic nervous system. So this is our body's internal control system that automatically regulates functions such as our heart rate, our respiratory rate, sweat gland response. So this could happen just from sitting outside on a hot day. We all get overheated. In the summer, it's really hot here. We may start sweating. We may notice our heart racing. Our body's just going to kick in naturally to start to try and regulate that. The second thing is if we perceive that we're in a very stressful or potentially dangerous situation and we need to try and get out of it. So if that happens, let's say we see, something coming towards us and we need to get out of that situation, our body's going to rapidly enter into an involuntary fight or flight mode. And this is thanks to our sympathetic nervous system, but we don't even have to think about it. We're either going to try and fight it off, the danger, or we're going to try and get out of there. But the third thing, and this is what I'm going to hone in for the rest of the talk, is that research has also demonstrated a really strong relationship between a high resting heart rate at baseline. So you and I right now, sitting on the couch watching this presentation, and the occurrence of a heart attack, chest pain, or stroke. Okay. This is because the higher our resting heart rate, the greater the amount of oxygen consumption needed for our muscular tissue of our heart to keep beating. So over time, the higher our heart rate, the more we have to breathe in that oxygen. It's going to cause fatigue and structural damage to the elastic fibers in our arterial walls, impacting their ability to function and remain healthy, to keep us with a healthy heart. So why this is really important is that research has demonstrated that a high resting heart rate is a huge risk factor for increased heart disease related mortality. So kind of that deadly heart attack, deadly stroke, that chest pain that turns into something more serious. So of the 38 studies published on this topic between 1944 and 2006, so 50 years of knowledge, 95% of these reported an association between an elevated resting heart rate and cardiovascular mortality, even after we adjusted for things like smoking status, obesity, the use of hypertensive medication, and a history of cardiovascular disease, high cholesterol, or diabetes. It's really this high resting heart rate that gives us a clue in our overall heart health. This relationship was found to be generally stronger in men than women. And our currently held scientific understanding is that there is an incremental increase in risk in both men and women, regardless if they have an official kind of cardiovascular disease or not, that exert rates above 60 beats per minute. So 60 beats per minute is a really healthy heart. When we're sitting there watching our favorite show, 60 beats per minute is really kind of this gold standard. Okay, let me move this real quick so I can read my slide. Okay, so there's good news, and I think this is now what all of us are here to hear. So there's increasing evidence that companion animals, especially dogs, but there's lots of evidence for cats and fish and horses all starting to come out, but especially dogs, is that companion animals appear to decrease both our resting heart rate and our heart rate reactivity in humans. So current research supports the theory that animal companionship can decrease patterns of autonomic nervous system responses, that's our heart rate response, under both baseline, which is just kind of our normal everyday activity, and stressful conditions. So for example, the presence of a familiar canine companion in a lab study has been shown to substantially decrease participants' heart rate responses to generic mental stressors. The first group of researchers ever to look at this was in the early 90s, and they measured the heart rate response arithmetic exercise, either in the presence of a friend, their dog, or alone. And it was actually hugely significant. When they were with their dog, their heart beat 20 beats per minute less than if they were alone or with their friend. I mean, that's a huge difference. Okay. Another recent study examined the heart rate in 240 heterosexual couples, so 480 individuals total. Half of these couples owned one pet. So again, now cat comes in, a cat or a dog, while the other half had not owned a pet in at least 5 years. All of these participants performed a standard mental arithmetic exercise. Like, these researchers really think that math is a stressor. I can appreciate that. And then they were asked to engage in a 2-minute immersion of their hand in ice water under one of 4 randomly assigned social conditions. So either alone, if they had a pet, they were with their pet. If they didn't have a pet, they were with a close friend, with their spouse, or with their spouse and their pet. And then if they didn't have a pet, they were with their spouse and a friend. And the results were that pet owners right off the bat, before they even did any experiments, showed lower heart rates, on average 3 beats per minute. Pet owners have just a lower heart rate in general. And then pet owners had significantly lower heart rate responses during that mental arithmetic exercise. And then regardless of the social condition, whether they were alone, with their spouse, with their friend, or with their pet owners' heart rates were significantly lower when their hands were in freezing water. So all across the board, having a pet present under all of these circumstances helped to keep their heart rate down. Okay, so a few more really interesting studies. So animal companionship and heart rate in very stressed out humans. So a group of researchers examined 48 hypertensive stockbrokers, probably one of the most stressful jobs that there are, 24 men, 24 women, all of whom had been diagnosed with hypertension. And so at the start of the study, participants completed, again, an initial mental stress session, both oral and paper arithmetic exercises. Seems to induce a lot of stress. And then they were randomized into 2 groups. So basically the results of this really interesting study, and it's the only one of its kind, and it's just such a neat study in that they got the participants to agree to adopt or rescue a shelter animal. And interestingly, all of the participants ended up, there was no obligation to keep the shelter animal, they all did. So that's a fun fact about this study. And basically what they found is, yes, of course the medication worked and it worked well, but the participants who had adopted pets exhibited a significantly lower heart rate when the stressor, that arithmetic, was repeated as compared to the control group who had only received the medication. And it was 10 beats per minute, a 10 beats per minute lower heart rate, which is hugely significant. Okay, just 1 or 2 more studies. So there's also very strong evidence of survival rates after a heart attack in pet owners. So this is looking at 1 year out. Researchers examined the physiological data from 424 patients who had recently suffered a heart attack, and 1 year later, 369 of those had survived, so 87%. And of these, 112 owned dogs. The researchers found that controlling for several other health factors, dog ownership was strongly associated with decreased mortality. And specifically, the likelihood of mortality was 4 times higher for non-dog owners than for dog owners. And there's a lot of theories about that. And I think it would apply to every pet, but that engagement really promotes health, taking your dog for a walk, playing with your dog, like it really makes you more active and healthy. And then finally, long-term survival after a heart attack. The same group of researchers evaluated long-term survival in post-heart attack patients who had survived a minimum of 6 months. They used data from 460 patients, with 17 patients passing away in an average of, a little over 2 years. And they controlled for symptoms of depression, anxiety, low social support, which we know contribute to mortality post-heart attack. And what was fascinating is their model showed that not owning a pet was the only significant predictor of mortality long-term after a heart attack, which is just astounding. I mean, the power of animal companionship. Okay. I'm going to switch now. So we've been talking about our resting heart rate while we're awake, but what about when we're asleep? So insomnia is the most common of sleep disorders, and it's defined by difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, waking up too early, or just not feeling rested after we have slept a couple hours. So lack of sleep is strongly associated with significant psychological distress, daytime fatigue, and the increased probability of falling asleep while we're at work during our daytime hours. Furthermore, insomnia has also been associated with an increased risk of accidental injury, diminished quality of life, cognitive impairment, depression, and cardiovascular disease. So in this regard, insomnia has been thought to influence overall mortality, in particular that stroke and heart attack. Okay, so there's a really strong relationship between poor sleep, cardiovascular disease, and mortality. In a study that was recently conducted with more than 20,000 men in the US, researchers found that those that reported insomnia symptoms were linked with lower physical activity levels, higher BMIs, and a higher incidence of depression, hypertension, elevated cholesterol, diabetes, heart attack, and stroke. Furthermore, this research also concluded that men who had severe symptoms of insomnia had 55% increased risk of cardiovascular disease-related mortality. And those who experience that non-restorative sleep, you sleep but you just do not feel rested in the morning, had a 32% increased risk of cardiovascular disease-related mortalities relative to men who didn't experience these. Okay, so why is sleep so important? So we've studied this for decades, and we still really don't have a solid answer, except that there's a lot of evidence collected in both human and animal studies that demonstrates that sleep provides the physical body with an opportunity for repair and renewal. So during sleep, we progress through 4 stages of increasingly deeper sleep in which our body temperature drops, our muscles relax, our heart rate slows, and our breathing slows. And several studies have shown that these restorative bodily functions occur primarily, if not entirely, while we're asleep. So this includes muscle growth, metabolism, regulation, tissue repair, protein synthesis, growth hormone release, and adenosine extraction, which is actually found in coffee, but it's a neurotransmitter that impacts how tired we are and our ability to really function. If we don't get sleep, none of these things happen. And in the most notorious but horribly controversial of these experiments, animals entirely deprived of sleep lost total immune functioning and died within just a few weeks. Okay, so now the effects of pet ownership on sleep. I don't know about any of you. I have a dog. He sleeps in the bed, but we will get to that. So one of the first studies to explore the effect that our pets have on our sleep was done by the Mayo Clinic, and they saw 300 patients who were coming in saying that they couldn't sleep. So of these patients, 52% own 1 or more pets, primarily cats or dogs. And 60% of these owners reported that their pets slept in the bedroom with them at night. 53% of these owners reported that their sleep was disrupted to some extent on a nightly basis by their animals. However, only 1% felt that their sleep was disrupted for more than 20 minutes. And a similar study, again, by the Mayo Clinic, collected data from 150 patients, again, seeking treatment, and they found similar figures in pet ownership, 49%, and 56% of these allowed their pets into the bedroom at night. Only 20% of patients described their pets as disruptive, whereas 41% actually said, no, they're beneficial to my sleep. And individuals in both of these studies that I just referenced described their pet's presence in their bedroom as providing security, companionship, relaxation, which they claimed helped them sleep. It should be noted that in these studies, it wasn't categorized whether the pets were on the floor or in the bed. And then finally, most recently, the most recent study on this did aim to assess the difference between if your pet is in the bedroom but on the floor or a chair or in bed with you. So the study, again, Mayo Clinic, evaluated the sleep of 40 healthy adults and their dogs, no puppies, they were all older than 6 months. And each participant wore a sleep monitor for a week and, kept a diary of their bedtime, their perceived quality of sleep, and the nightly dog location. Overall, researchers found that a single dog in the bedroom, but not the bed, maintained an 83% sleep efficiency. So what sleep efficiency is, it's the time you want to sleep versus the time that you actually do. So if you got into bed at 8 o'clock with the intent of going to bed at 8 o'clock and you fell asleep in that moment and you woke up at 7 the next day, you would have 100% sleep efficiency. Sleeping with a dog in the bed, however, was lower. It was an 80% sleep efficiency. And what they found is that how long it took to fall asleep did not vary based on the dog's location. Individuals whose dogs slept with them in their beds, however, woke up more frequently than those dogs who slept on the floor. So the question, are pet owners doing themselves a disservice by allowing their animals in their rooms, specifically in their beds at night? Okay, there's good news. While normal sleep efficiency is considered to be 80% and above, so that's what the researchers found, even with a dog in the bed, it was still 80%. Most healthy adults, however, demonstrate a 90% and above sleep efficiency, which begs the question, are we really hurting ourselves? So researchers say, no, actually, it's the opposite. They maintain that our intense bond and our loyalty to our pets kind of impedes our ability for us to objectively assess sleep disruption due to the presence of a pet. And there's a handful of theoretical explanations as to why individuals might emotionally value their pet's presence in their bedrooms at night, despite the physiological consequences resulting from delayed sleep or disturbance. And by extending, for any of you that have studied psychology, John Bowlby is one of the major players, and he developed attachment theory. It's usually between parents and their children, but there's a lot of researchers that argue that no, this could completely be applied to our pets. Our relationship with our pets, for animal lovers, they are just as valuable and important to us as children. And so we may be motivated to sleep close to them to feel more secure and really avoid that separation anxiety. And then others have equated asking us to sleep without our pets as akin to asking us to sleep without a core piece of ourselves. That's, us sleeping worse. So I just wanted to touch on my dissertation, which I wrote in collaboration with Stanford and the Palo Alto VA. And I was looking at veterans with post-traumatic stress disorders and pairing them 1 week with a dog, 1 week off, 1 week with a dog, 1 week off. And what I found was that when the veterans had their dogs present at night, they actually had a higher heart rate throughout most of the night compared when their dogs were absent. until they started waking up and getting out of bed. And if their dogs were present, their heart rates were shown to be significantly lower than when their dogs were absent. And this switch took place right between 4:30 and 5:30. This was the normal time for them to get up. They had alarms set, just as they were seemingly becoming aware of whether their dog was there or not. So this research is really fascinating and important because several studies have shown that the most serious cardiovascular incidents, the heart attacks, the strokes, follow a circadian pattern. So they peak in the morning right after waking up and getting out of bed. So heart rate, plays a substantial gradual decline during sleep, but then when we start to, wake up and get out of bed, there's a really sharp spike. So this spike is what would trigger heart attack or stroke. It's more likely to cause much more damage. So the reason this research was so fascinating is it showed that when we wake up and we see our dog with us, it immediately lowers our heart rate, which could potentially be preventing a heart attack or stroke. And then just to kind of wrap up, I have a few slides left. I'd like to switch now. We've been focusing on the physical, our physical health and companion animals, but I do want to focus on our mental health as well. So social isolation and loneliness they were already a growing epidemic in the United States, but they've really been exacerbated during this COVID-19 pandemic. And there's several populations, including older adults, single parents, veterans, widows, those who have suffered a traumatic experience, those in the LGBT community, and special needs youth are among the most vulnerable. So the mental and physical health impacts of social isolation and loneliness, we have a lot of data on that. And research really indicates that loneliness is a risk factor and may directly contribute to cognitive decline and dementia, especially Alzheimer's, impaired executive functioning, increased depression and anxiety, substance use, and suicide attempts. And a recent study out of Cornell found that social isolation increases the risk of heart disease by 29% and stroke by 32%. This is a really serious thing. Loneliness can impair health it raises our stress hormones, which causes inflammation, which in turn increases our risk for infections, arthritis, and type 2 diabetes. Social relationships, both quantity and quality, but really quality, affect our mental and physical health in that adults who feel more connected in their neighborhoods and communities and with their kind of immediate surroundings, we know that they are typically healthier and they live longer than their isolated peers. A few years ago, there was actually a summit on this topic. It was the Summit on Social Isolation and Companion Animals, and researchers explored the potential for companion animals to provide effective relief and to serve as a complementary treatment for social isolation, loneliness, and all the related physical health conditions. And they did a huge nationwide survey, millions of people. It was actually sponsored by the Mars Candy Bar Corporation. The owner is a significant animal welfare patron. And what they found was that 85% of respondents agreed that interactions with pets help reduce loneliness. 76% agreed that human-animal interactions can help address social isolation. 80% of pet owners said that their pet makes them feel less lonely, and 54% said that their pet helps connect them with people in their environment. And then just to address some of these certain specific populations, so older adults. Among older adults especially, animal companionship, there's a lot of research coming out. We're just on the cusp of finding out so much, but animal companionship could be an important source of social support that enhances well-being. So specifically, elderly individuals who have a cat or a dog are better able to perform certain, they're called ADLs. You might have heard that phrase before, activities of daily living. So those with a cat or a dog, and I would venture to say with any animal, have much better ability to climb stairs, bend and kneel, take their medication on time and responsibly, prepare meals, and then bathe and dress themselves. And companion animals also have the potential to create meanings in the lives and bring comfort to those diagnosed with dementia, especially again, those Alzheimer's, that a companion animal increases positive, fulfilling emotions. It really gives them a reason to keep living, especially if they're in a care facility. And it lowers those, what we see are those agitation behaviors, and report a great deal of benefit from reduced stress by petting these companion animals and engaging with them. Oops, I think I'm there we go. For those who have experienced a trauma, animal companionship appears to great benefit social functioning, mood and emotion regulation, and feelings of autonomy. So for example, individuals diagnosed with PTSD reported that they perceive their pets as a calming influence that provides them with a sense, it allows them to get through their day and do the things that they need to do. And then research has shown that post-trauma, the presence of a pet may reduce depression and anxiety symptoms, feelings we think is a protective factor, keeping the person really removed from their environment so that they don't get hurt again. The pets will bring that down. It's that it is safe to engage. It also increases their confidence levels and their perceived feelings of personal safety. And it fosters a greater ability to bond and trust with fellow humans. And I'm going to touch on that, that's especially true with veterans. And I find this really fascinating. So veterans report that it's the interpersonal aspect of war, specifically that they're asked, to go and commit either physical and or psychological violence against another human being. They really report that this aspect, hurting another human that they don't know, is the most damaging component that inhibits their return into society. And it's these experiences that manifest into emotional difficulties when they try to return and engage in their social and family relationships. So research conducted among both current veterans of current wars, but all the way back into World War II, shows that this interpersonal, this human-to-human violence, physical and psychological, really impacts family functioning. Returning to an intimate relationship, it leads to high rates of divorce and then, unfortunately, interpersonal domestic violence. Hearing that veterans view their animals, their pets, as the safest, consistently, the safest sources of interaction and engagement, and that this trust with their animal allows them to gradually in a meaningful and trusting. Okay. And then in terms terms of LGBT youth and animal companionship, a really impactful 2018 study advanced the research on LGBT populations with regards to the association between lack of social support and unhealthy outcomes, including depression, substance use, and suicidal ideation. And very sadly, of course, they found that discrimination or prejudice based on sexual orientation and gender identity are a pervasive culture in this country. But that the unconditional love and acceptance that companion animals provide results in these animals serving multiple roles and purposes in the lives of this population, especially for social and emotional support. Okay. And then the final population is special needs youth and animal companionship. So a recent study found that children with autism diagnosed on the autism spectrum were significantly calmer while playing with guinea pigs in the classroom. And it supports the hypothesis that animals offer unconditional acceptance, making them a comfort to the children. In general, research has shown that pairing pets with individuals who have autism can significantly improve several factors, including socialization skills, eye contact, and positive affect, while decreasing negative habits such as whining, crying, crowning. For some individuals with autism, assigning them a full-time therapy dog can dramatically improve their lives as well as their parents and siblings. And with youth in general, this one has to do with ADHD, but a dog companion can help children with ADHD better focus attention on their schoolwork. But overall, research shows that kids who read to animals or have, a special relationship with animals have better social skills. They're also more likely to share, cooperate, and volunteer more, and they did have fewer behavioral problems. And then an interesting study, and I think this is applicable, that teens who cared for a fish, again, I really think it's any animal, if they had diabetes, they were better able to manage their disease as they were more disciplined about checking their own blood glucose, likely to be able to take care of yourself. And my final slide, so when it is safe to be social again, hopefully we are very close to that. While companion animals have long been identified as a direct source of comfort and support, a recent study conducted in both the US and Australia investigated their role as catalysts in forming friendships and social networks. And the study found that for most pet owners, their animals facilitated relationships when they from which they derived tangible forms of social support, both of a practical and emotionally supportive nature. And given the evidence for social isolation as a risk factor for mental health, as well as a protective factor for individual and community well-being, pets may play an important factor in developing healthy and close-knit communities. When you're out walking your dog, you're going to stop and talk to other dog owners, or you could be at the dog park and really engage and get to know people that way. So these are my two co-workers. This is Bear and Nicholas, and just want to thank you for putting up with my horrible internet connection. If please, Kylan and Marvik, please feel free to send this out. I really did put all the information on there in case the internet didn't cooperate, but if there's any questions, or if I could ever send anyone any resources or be of service, please do not hesitate to let me know.
Thank you, Katie. We really appreciate it. And all went well. And thanks so much for being so detailed with your slides. So that will be great for everybody. Thanks for just, giving a great overview about both physical health benefits and emotional health benefits. And I really love that you put in that also about how reading to animals is really helpful for kids. And we actually have our Pause for Tales program at the Peninsula Humane Society where the kids read to the therapy dogs, and they're doing it virtually right now. And it's actually going really well.
So we have our first question in the chat, and it reads, in Katie's dissertation, what are her thoughts on why the sleeping heart rate was higher during sleep when the dog was present?
Sure. I think it goes back, our animals do keep us awake at night, and while the dogs were required to sleep on the floor, they make noise during the night. I think we're more aware of their presence, and they would keep us up, thus keeping our they might wake up, they might hear something and bark, they might stir, we might wake up, so that's going to raise our heart rate. That's why it was typically compared to when they're not there. We usually get a bit sounder sleep, but again, it's what's that payoff. It would cause us, I think we can't objectively assess whether or not they're disrupting our sleep. Like certainly if they stir, it's going to wake us up. Or if they hear a noise, they might get up and investigate, which is going to wake us up and raise our heart rate. That's why it's higher when they're there. But then it's that unique switch that it's lower than comparatively to when they're not. It's very calming, and that might be preventing heart attacks and strokes. And that would be applicable to all of us, not just veterans, of course. Dog sleeps under the covers. It's really but I do sleep better when he's there. So I totally get it. It's that really fascinating switch where yes, our heart rate might be a little bit higher because they are there, because we're aware of their presence and it's kind of keeping us up. But knowing that they're there when it's time to get up is going to calm us and really stave off those incidents. It's a significant heart rate difference. I mean, which would be about 5 beats or more per minute, which is pretty significant.
I could ask, I don't know, Katie, if you had touched upon that, but in terms of, the human-animal bond being, bidirectional, what would you say are some of the health benefits for our pets and for our companion animals?
Totally. I think especially right now when we are at home with them, we're so attuned to, their movements and their little behaviors that if something is off, we recognize it immediately, and we will take them to the vet, or we will do whatever next steps might be most helpful to them. So because we have that bond, you're absolutely right. It goes both ways. We're so used to their little mannerisms that if we recognize they're not acting how we might expect them to, we're on top of it. Yeah, and they live longer lives with us because we care. Animal people care so much about our animals. The pet industry last year in this country was multi-billion dollars. And not during the pandemic, but before, and every year before, people in this country gave more to animal welfare organizations than they did to human welfare organizations. We love our pets in this country.
Oh, wait. I feel like when my dog jumps on the bed after I wake up at that instant, but later she curls up under my armpit and I fall back asleep. The quality of sleep is better even if I briefly wake up.
Yeah, and that's exactly what the science is saying, that that little when they jump on the bed, okay, our heart might go up a couple beats for maybe we stay awake for the next 5 minutes, but overall having them right here is going to improve not only going to improve our sleep, but we are so biased that we can't, like, next morning, oh, I slept great. They could be like jumping on top of us and we love them so much. Like, we lose all our ability. Like, we're blinded by love, basically. So sorry, everyone. When I went to propose my dissertation topic about doing this with animals, I was told, no way, absolutely not. And I mean, I was always going to do it, and it was just a matter of finding the right person. But I think that goes to show that we're only really just at the beginning of taking this topic seriously. I think, there's a lot of like, oh, that's cute, or oh, how sweet. But no, I mean, these are really hardcore hitting studies that are showing how impactful our animals are for our physical and mental health. And more researchers and scientists are taking this seriously, and there's more money being put into this.
I agree. It's an absolutely exciting time, right, in the field, in the human animal bond field.
Please feel free to email me, and I'm just so grateful to you all for hanging in. There's a lot of things worse than bad internet connection, but I know it's frustrating when you're trying to pay attention. So I'm so grateful to you for hanging in there.